The last photo Edwin Arrieta posted showed him smiling on a Thai beach, the sunset painting the sky orange and gold behind him. He captioned it simply, "Paradise found." Within 24 hours, his body would be dismembered into 14 pieces and scattered across that same paradise like discarded trash. His hands were found at a landfill, his torso washed ashore in a black garbage bag. His head was buried in the jungle soil. Edwin was 44 years old, a plastic surgeon, a son, a brother, a man who had spent his life helping others feel beautiful, only to have his own body desecrated in the most horrific way imaginable. He had traveled from Colombia to Thailand seeking peace, adventure, and perhaps connection. What he found instead was a predator wearing a friendly smile. The man who killed him had planned every detail. He bought the knives days in advance. He purchased cleaning supplies and rubber gloves. He studied the island's layout, identifying where to hide body parts where they might never be found. This wasn't rage. This wasn't a fight gone wrong. This was cold, calculated murder. And the killer had one fatal flaw. He underestimated how quickly the truth would surface. Edwin's family had no idea that while they were texting him, asking about his trip, his body was already being carved apart in a hotel room. They had no idea that the man he trusted, the man he had flown across the world to meet, was the same man who would ensure Edwin never made it home. This is Edwin's story, and this is the story of the man who thought he could get away with murder. Welcome to Crime 7, where we don't just tell stories, we uncover truth. This channel exists because some cases deserve more than headlines. They deserve investigation. They deserve remembrance. They deserve justice, even when the system fails. I'm your host, and tonight, we're diving deep into a case that shocked two continents and exposed the darkest side of human nature. Before we begin, a disclaimer. This video contains descriptions of real violence and real tragedy. The case we're covering is based on documented evidence, court records, and investigative reports. We approach these stories with respect for the victims and their families. If you're sensitive to discussions of murder and dismemberment, please consider whether this content is right for you. Our goal is not sensationalism, it's truth. Everything you're about to hear is real. The names are real. The crime is real. And the consequences are real. We've researched extensively, cross-referenced multiple sources, and presented the facts as they've been established by law enforcement and the courts. This is not entertainment. This is documentation. This is memory. This is Crime 7. If you believe stories like Edwin's deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join a community that refuses to let victims be forgotten. Now let's begin. August 2023. Koh Phangan, Thailand. An island known for full moon parties, crystal clear waters, and backpackers seeking enlightenment or escape. But on this particular August morning, paradise would reveal its darkest secret. Local fishermen were pulling in their nets near the shore when they noticed something unusual floating in the water. Black plastic bags, heavy and sodden, drifting with the tide. When they pulled the first bag aboard, the smell hit them immediately. Inside was human flesh, dismembered, decomposing. The fishermen immediately contacted police, who arrived to find not just one bag, but several, each containing pieces of what was once a human being. Arms, legs, internal organs, all carefully wrapped and disposed of like garbage. The island's tourist paradise was now a crime scene. Thai police moved quickly, securing the area and beginning what would become one of the most intensive investigations in the island's history. They started pulling surveillance footage from every camera on the island, hotels, convenience stores, beaches, ferry terminals. What they found would lead them directly to a man who thought he had committed the perfect crime. A man who had spent days planning. A man who had no idea that technology would be his undoing. The Royal Thai Police cordoned off multiple locations across Koh Phangan within hours of discovering the body parts. This wasn't a random act of violence. The precision of the dismemberment suggested medical knowledge, or at least careful planning. Each piece had been separated at joints, suggesting the killer had taken time to methodically disassemble the victim's body. Investigators knew they were dealing with someone organized, calculated, and dangerous. Forensic teams worked around the clock, collecting DNA samples from the remains, and beginning the gruesome task of identifying the victim. Meanwhile, detectives began reviewing hotel check-ins from the past week, looking for anyone who had recently arrived on the island. They cross-referenced missing persons reports with immigration records. And then they caught a break. A hotel reported that a guest had checked out abruptly, leaving behind a room that reeked of cleaning chemicals. When police entered room 208 at the Phangan bungalows, they found what the killer had tried desperately to erase. Despite extensive cleaning, luminol tests revealed massive amounts of blood spatter on the walls, floor, and bathroom tiles. The bathtub drain contained human tissue, and security footage showed the occupant of that room, DanielSancho Bronchalo, making multiple trips in and out, carrying heavy black bags. The same bags found floating in the ocean. But the most damning evidence came from convenience store footage. Days before the murder, Sancho was captured on camera purchasing an arsenal of killing and disposal tools. Kitchen knives, heavy-duty garbage bags, rubber gloves, bleach, cleaning solutions, and duct tape. He made these purchases at different stores, clearly trying to avoid suspicion. He paid cash. He wore a hat and sunglasses. But he couldn't hide from the cameras. And he couldn't hide from what was coming next. This investigation is just beginning, and what police discovered next will send chills down your spine. If you're already hooked, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to Crime 7, because this story gets much darker. Stay with us. Edwin Arrieta was born in Larica, a small town in northern Colombia, in 1979. He grew up in modest circumstances, the son of hard-working parents who instilled in him the value of education and perseverance. From a young age, Edwin showed exceptional intelligence and ambition. While other kids played soccer in the streets, Edwin was studying, dreaming of becoming a doctor, of lifting his family out of poverty through his own success. He attended medical school in Monteria, Colombia, where he specialized in plastic and reconstructive surgery. His professors remembered him as meticulous, passionate, and deeply empathetic toward patients. Edwin wasn't interested in just performing procedures. He wanted to understand the psychological impact of physical appearance, to help people heal from trauma and reclaim confidence. After graduation, he built a successful practice, becoming one of the most sought-after surgeons in his region. But Edwin's life wasn't just about work. He was openly gay in a country where LGBTQ+ individuals still faced significant discrimination and violence. Despite the risks, Edwin refused to hide who he was. He attended pride events, advocated for LGBTQ+ rights, and used his platform as a respected professional to push for acceptance. His courage inspired many, but it also made him vulnerable. Friends would later say that Edwin struggled to find genuine connection, that his success and openness sometimes attracted people with darker intentions. In the summer of 2023, Edwin decided he needed a break. The pandemic had been exhausting for medical professionals, and he wanted adventure, relaxation, and maybe romance. He had been communicating online with DanielSancho, a Spanish chef who ran a YouTube channel featuring cooking tutorials and travel vlogs. They had connected through social media, bonding over their shared love of food, travel, and living authentically. Daniel seemed charming, creative, and interested in Edwin not just physically but personally. Edwin booked his flight to Thailand with excitement. He told his family he was meeting a friend, that he'd be back in 2 weeks with stories and photos. His mother hugged him at the airport, made him promise to call every day. His sister joked that he'd better bring back souvenirs. Edwin smiled, kissed them both, and walked toward his gate. None of them knew they would never see him alive again. His social media posts from those first days in Thailand showed genuine happiness. Photos of street food markets, temples, beaches at sunset. He posted a video trying Thai iced tea for the first time, laughing at how sweet it was. In one photo, DanielSancho appeared beside him, arm draped casually over Edwin's shoulder. The caption read, "New adventures with new friends." The comments were full of heart emojis and excitement. No one suspected that behind Daniel's smile was a plan already in motion. Edwin's last post went live on August 1st, 2023 at 6:47 p.m. The sunset photo. Paradise found. By the next morning, he was dead. His phone went silent, His daily calls to his mother stopped. His sister's texts went unanswered. Back in Colombia, his family felt the first stirrings of panic, but they told themselves he was probably just busy, probably having too much fun to check his phone. They had no idea that at that very moment, police in Thailand were pulling pieces of Edwin's body from the ocean. Edwin Arrieta had spent his life healing others, building a career through skill and compassion, fighting for acceptance in a world that often rejected people like him. He traveled to Thailand seeking joy, connection, and a brief escape from the pressures of his demanding profession. What he found instead was a man who saw him not as a human being, but as an obstacle, a problem to be solved, a body to be disposed of. Koh Phangan sits in the Gulf of Thailand, a 46-square-mile island that has become synonymous with backpacker culture and hedonistic freedom. Every month, tens of thousands of tourists descend on its beaches for the famous full moon party, where fire dancers, neon body paint, and all-night raves create an atmosphere of consequence-free abandon. But beyond the parties, Koh Phangan offers something else: isolation. Dense jungle, hidden beaches, places where someone could disappear, and no one would ask questions. The island's infrastructure is limited. There are no traffic lights, few police officers, and surveillance cameras are sparse compared to mainland Thailand. Most accommodations are small bungalows or budget guest houses, run by locals who prioritize privacy over security. Tourists pay cash, use fake names, and come and go without paperwork. For most visitors, this freedom is part of the appeal. For DanielSancho, it was part of the plan. August 2023 was particularly busy on Koh Phangan. The full moon party had just ended, and the island was still crowded with lingering tourists. Ferry boats arrived daily from the mainland, packed with travelers seeking the next adventure. Amid this chaos, two men checking into separate bungalows attracted no attention. Edwin Arrieta arrived first, checking into a modest beachfront accommodation with ocean views. DanielSancho arrived the following day, booking a room just minutes away. The island's atmosphere, transient, anonymous, isolated, created the perfect environment for what was about to happen. In a place where everyone was a stranger and no one asked questions, a predator could operate with impunity. And for a few days, that's exactly what DanielSancho did. He scouted locations. He purchased supplies. He waited for the right moment. And Edwin, trusting and unsuspecting, had no idea that paradise was about to become his tomb. August 2nd, 2023 began like any other day on Koh Phangan. Tourists woke to the sound of waves, ordered coffee from beachside cafes, and planned their day's adventures. Edwin Arrieta woke up in his bungalow around 9 a.m., sending a good morning text to his sister back in Colombia. He told her he was meeting his friend Daniel for lunch, that they might rent scooters and explore the island's interior. It was the last message his family would ever receive from him. Security footage captured Edwin leaving his bungalow at 11:23 a.m., wearing board shorts and a tank top, carrying only his phone and wallet. He walked toward the main road, where Daniel was waiting on a rented scooter. The two men were seen driving together toward Daniel's accommodation. They stopped at a local market, purchasing fresh fruit and bottled water. To any observer, they looked like what they appeared to be: two friends enjoying a vacation together. They arrived at Daniel's bungalow around noon. What happened inside that room over the next several hours remains partially unknown, as Daniel has given conflicting accounts. But forensic evidence tells a clear story. At some point, Edwin was struck in the head with a blunt object, likely rendering him unconscious. Then, Daniel strangled him. Investigators believe Edwin fought back initially. Defensive wounds were found on his hands, but the attack was swift and overwhelming. By early afternoon, Edwin Arrieta was dead. What followed was methodical and horrifying. Daniel spent the next several hours dismembering Edwin's body in the bathtub, using the knives he had purchased days earlier. He separated the body into 14 pieces, wrapping each in plastic and placing them in garbage bags. The bathroom became a slaughterhouse, blood covering every surface despite Daniel's efforts to clean as he worked. It would have taken hours. It would have required stamina, focus, and a complete absence of empathy. By evening, Daniel began disposing of the remains. He made multiple trips around the island, scattering body parts in different locations to minimize the chance of discovery. Some bags went into the ocean, weighted down with rocks. Others were buried in shallow graves in the jungle. Several were simply thrown into public dumpsters, mixed in with regular trash. Daniel thought he was being clever, spreading the evidence so thin that it could never be pieced together. But he underestimated Thai investigators. That night, Daniel posted on his Instagram story a photo of a Thai dinner with the caption, "Exploring local flavors." He appeared calm, unbothered, already constructing an alibi. When Edwin's family began calling and texting, Daniel ignored them. When hotel staff asked if he'd seen Edwin, Daniel said they'd had lunch, but Edwin had left to meet other friends. He was lying with the ease of someone who had rehearsed a story. But the lies were about to unravel. The evidence against Daniel was mounting fast, but what investigators discovered next would seal his fate forever. If this story is gripping you, smash that like button and subscribe to Crime 7, because we're just getting started, and the truth is about to hit hard. Comment below, what would you do if you were the detective on this case? The Royal Thai Police launched a full-scale investigation within hours of discovering the first body parts. Lead Detective Sergeant Thonchai Bamrungrit assembled a team of forensic specialists, surveillance analysts, and local officers who knew every inch of Koh Phangan. They understood the urgency. Tourists were still arriving daily, and if a killer was operating on the island, every minute counted. The first priority was identification of the victim, and DNA testing began immediately. While forensics worked to identify Edwin, detectives started canvassing hotels and guest houses, asking about recent check-ins, unusual behavior, and sudden departures. The breakthrough came quickly. A hotel manager reported that a foreign guest in room 208 had checked out abruptly, claiming a family emergency required him to leave immediately. But housekeeping staff reported something disturbing. The room had an overwhelming smell of bleach, and despite apparent cleaning efforts, there were suspicious stains on the walls and floor. Police obtained a warrant and entered the room with forensic equipment. What they found was damning. Luminol testing revealed extensive blood spatter that had soaked into the walls and grout between bathroom tiles. The bathtub drain contained human tissue fragments that even industrial-strength drain cleaner couldn't fully dissolve. Hair samples were collected, along with partial fingerprints lifted from surfaces the killer had missed during cleanup. This room was unquestionably a murder scene. The hotel provided registration information for the room's occupant, DanielSancho Bronchalo, Spanish national, 30 years old. They also provided something even more valuable, security footage. Detectives watched hours of tape, piecing together Daniel's movements over the previous week. They saw him arriving on the island, checking in, leaving to make purchases, and returning late at night with heavy bags. They saw Edwin arriving at the bungalow on August 2nd. They never saw Edwin leaving, but the most damning footage came from local convenience stores. Working backward from the date of the murder, investigators visited every shop within walking distance of Daniel's hotel. At each location, they requested surveillance footage from the previous week. What they found was chilling evidence of premeditation. 7 days before Edwin's murder, Daniel was captured purchasing kitchen knives. 5 days before, he bought heavy-duty garbage bags and rubber gloves. 3 days before, he purchased bleach, cleaning solutions, and duct tape. Each purchase was made at a different store, a clear attempt to avoid arousing suspicion. But Daniel had made one critical mistake. He was a foreigner on a small island where foreigners stood out. Every shopkeeper remembered him. Every camera captured his face. And every receipt was time-stamped, creating an undeniable timeline of premeditation. This wasn't a crime of passion or self-defense. This was planned murder, and the evidence was overwhelming. Meanwhile, DNA results confirmed the victim's identity as Edwin Arrieta. His family was notified, and their worst fears were confirmed. Interpol issued an alert for DanielSancho, and Thai immigration was notified to flag his passport. But where was Daniel now? Had he already fled the country? The answer came faster than investigators expected. Daniel was still on the island, staying at a different hotel under his real name, apparently believing he had successfully covered his tracks. On August 4th, 2023, just 48 hours after Edwin's murder, Thai police arrested DanielSancho at his new accommodation. He was calm during the arrest, almost eerily composed, asking what this was about, and insisting there must be some mistake. He was taken to the Koh Phangan police station, where he would be questioned for hours. And slowly, carefully, investigators would begin dismantling every lie he had prepared. In the interrogation room, DanielSancho sat across from Detective Sergeant Thongchai, flanked by interpreters and legal observers. The room was sparse, a metal table, uncomfortable chairs, fluorescent lighting that made everything look harsh and clinical. Daniel had been offered water and food, had been read his rights, and now faced the reality of his situation. Investigators laid out the evidence piece by piece, watching his reactions, waiting for the moment when his carefully constructed facade would crack. At first, Daniel denied everything. He claimed he barely knew Edwin, that they'd only met briefly on the island, that he had no idea what had happened to him. But when investigators showed him the surveillance footage, Daniel and Edwin riding together on the scooter, entering his bungalow, Edwin never leaving, his story began to shift. He admitted they had spent time together, but insisted Edwin had left alive, that someone else must have killed him after. Then investigators presented the convenience store footage, showing Daniel purchasing knives, bags, gloves, and cleaning supplies. They showed him the forensic evidence from his hotel room, the blood spatter, the tissue in the drain, the failed cleanup attempts. They explained that Edwin's DNA was all over that room, and that Edwin's dismembered body had been found in bags identical to those Daniel had purchased. The evidence was suffocating, leaving no room for denial. Finally, after hours of questioning, Daniel's story changed again. He claimed self-defense. He said Edwin had become aggressive, had tried to blackmail him, had threatened to release intimate photos and videos of them together on social media. Daniel claimed Edwin had attacked him first, that there had been a struggle, and that he had killed Edwin in a panic to protect himself. It was a desperate attempt to reduce the charges from premeditated murder to something lesser. But investigators weren't buying it. If this was self-defense, why had Daniel purchased murder weapons and disposal supplies days before Edwin's arrival? If this was a panicked reaction, why had he methodically dismembered the body and scattered the remains across the island? If he feared for his life, why hadn't he called police? Every element of Daniel's new story contradicted the physical evidence and his own documented behavior. The real truth began to emerge through digital forensics. Investigators seized Daniel's phone and computer, finding messages between him and Edwin dating back months. The conversation showed Daniel actively encouraging Edwin to visit Thailand, suggesting specific dates, even offering to help book accommodations. Edwin's messages were warm and trusting. Daniel's were calculated and manipulative. There was no evidence of blackmail threats from Edwin. Instead, there was evidence of Daniel researching how to dispose of bodies, searching for isolated locations on Koh Phangan, and browsing articles about unsolved murders. Further investigation revealed Daniel's financial troubles. His YouTube channel wasn't generating significant income, and he was deeply in debt. Edwin, by contrast, was financially successful. Some investigators theorized that money may have been a motive. Perhaps Daniel had lured Edwin to Thailand intending to rob him, and when that went wrong, he committed murder. Others believed it was simpler and darker. Daniel had invited Edwin to the island specifically to kill him, perhaps driven by internal homophobia, perhaps by some twisted psychological need for control. What became undeniably clear was that DanielSancho had lied about everything. He had lied about the nature of his relationship with Edwin. He had lied about his intentions in bringing Edwin to the island. He had lied about what happened in that hotel room. And even now, cornered by overwhelming evidence, he continued to lie, trying to manipulate the narrative to cast himself as victim rather than perpetrator. But the evidence spoke louder than any story Daniel could tell. The case against DanielSancho was already strong, but prosecutors knew they needed something irrefutable, something that would eliminate any possible doubt in the minds of judges and jury. That breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Daniel's own documentation of his crimes. Hidden in the deleted file section of his phone, forensic technicians recovered photos and videos that Daniel had taken during and after the murder, apparently as some form of trophy or record. The images were horrific. Photos of Edwin's dismembered body parts, taken in the bathtub of room 208. Videos showing Daniel cleaning the crime scene, narrating his cleanup process almost clinically, like he was documenting a cooking recipe rather than covering up a murder. In one particularly chilling clip, Daniel held up one of Edwin's hands, examining it with detached curiosity before placing it in a garbage bag. The footage was so disturbing that even seasoned detectives struggled to watch it completely. But why had Daniel documented his crime? Psychological experts brought in to consult on the case offered several theories. Some believed Daniel suffered from narcissistic personality disorder and couldn't resist preserving evidence of what he considered his cleverness and control. Others suggested the documentation was insurance, potential leverage if he ever needed to manipulate someone or trade information. A few theorized Daniel might have been creating content for dark web forums where users shared violent content. Whatever the reason, his compulsion to document had provided prosecutors with evidence that was utterly unassailable. The digital forensics team also recovered Daniel's search history from the weeks leading up to the murder, painting a picture of meticulous planning. He had searched how long does DNA evidence last, disposing of bodies in tropical climates, police investigation procedures Thailand, and countries without extradition to Spain. He had researched ocean currents around Koh Phangan to determine where weighted bags would drift. He had studied maps of the island's jungle interior, identifying isolated areas with no camera coverage or foot traffic. Perhaps most damning were messages Daniel had sent to friends back in Spain, hinting at dark intentions without being explicit. In one message sent 2 weeks before the murder, Daniel wrote, "Sometimes you have to make hard decisions. Sometimes the only way forward requires removing obstacles." Another message, sent just 3 days before Edwin's arrival, read, "Have you ever wondered what you're really capable of? I think I'm about to find out." Friends would later testify they had found these messages strange, but hadn't taken them seriously. The breakthrough evidence also included DNA matches that placed Daniel at every disposal site. When police located the buried body parts in the jungle, they found footprints matching Daniel's shoes. Fibers from his clothing were found clinging to tree bark near a burial site. Sand samples from his hotel room matched sand from the beach where bags had been disposed of. The web of physical evidence was complete, connecting Daniel to every stage of the crime: planning, execution, dismemberment, and disposal. With this evidence compiled, prosecutors built their case for premeditated murder with aggravating circumstances. They argued that Daniel had lured Edwin to Thailand specifically to kill him, that he had planned every detail, and that the brutality of the dismemberment and disposal demonstrated a complete lack of remorse or humanity. Under Thai law, premeditated murder with aggravating factors carried severe penalties, potentially including the death penalty. Daniel's legal team knew they were fighting a losing battle. The evidence was overwhelming, but Daniel's trial would reveal even more disturbing details. If you're invested in seeing justice served, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Crime 7 will be there for the trial, the verdict, and the aftermath. Comment below. Do you think justice can ever truly be served in cases like this? Let's discuss. The trial of DanielSancho Bronchalo began in a Thai courtroom in early 2024, drawing international media attention. Reporters from Spain and Colombia packed the gallery, alongside Edwin's grieving family members who had traveled to Thailand seeking answers and justice. Daniel sat in the defendant's chair, handcuffed and wearing prison clothing, his earlier composure replaced by visible anxiety as he faced the possibility of execution under Thai law. The prosecution presented their case methodically over several weeks. They called forensic experts who walked the court through DNA evidence, blood spatter analysis, and digital forensics. They screened the surveillance footage showing Daniel's premeditation, the knife purchases, the cleanup supplies, the calculated disposal of evidence. And most devastatingly, they presented the photos and videos Daniel had taken of his crime, forcing the courtroom to confront the brutality of what he had done. Edwin's family gave victim impact statements that left not a dry eye in the courtroom. His mother, Maria Artiega, spoke through tears about her son's kindness, his ambition, his courage in living authentically despite social pressures. She described the unbearable pain of receiving the call from Thai police, of having to identify her son from dental records because his body had been so completely destroyed. She looked directly at Daniel and asked simply, "Why? What did my son do to deserve this?" Daniel's defense team attempted to argue diminished capacity, claiming their client had suffered psychological trauma that impaired his judgment. They brought in psychologists who testified about Daniel's troubled childhood, his complicated relationship with his famous father, his struggles with identity and sexuality. They argued that Edwin's alleged blackmail threats had triggered a psychological break that led to the killing. But none of this explained the premeditation, the planning, the cold efficiency of the dismemberment and disposal. The trial included testimony from Edwin's friends and colleagues, who painted a picture of a man incapable of the violence or manipulation Daniel accused him of. They described Edwin as gentle, professional, and deeply ethical. They testified that Edwin had been excited about meeting Daniel, that he had spoken warmly about their growing friendship, that there was no evidence Edwin had ever been threatening or coercive in any relationship. Daniel's accusations were revealed as post facto justifications, lies told to minimize his guilt. After 6 weeks of testimony, the prosecution rested their case, and the court moved to deliberation. The judges, Thailand uses a panel system rather than juries for serious crimes, reviewed thousands of pages of evidence, forensic reports, and expert testimony. The deliberation took 3 days, and the courtroom was silent with anticipation when the judges finally returned to deliver their verdict. DanielSancho stood as the lead judge began to speak, his face pale and expressionless. The verdict came down definitively: guilty of premeditated murder with aggravating circumstances. The judges found that Daniel had lured Edwin to Thailand with the specific intention of killing him, that he had planned every detail of the crime, and that his dismemberment and disposal of the body demonstrated exceptional brutality. They rejected his self-defense claims entirely, citing the overwhelming evidence of premeditation. The courtroom erupted, Edwin's family sobbing with relief, reporters frantically taking notes, Daniel slumping in his chair as the reality hit him. Sentencing came days later. While Thai law allows for the death penalty in such cases, the judges opted for life imprisonment without possibility of parole, noting that Daniel's cooperation with some aspects of the investigation, after being confronted with irrefutable evidence, was a minor mitigating factor. He would spend the rest of his life in a Thai prison, a harsh environment known for overcrowding, disease, and violence. For a man who had lived a comfortable life in Spain, it would be its own form of death sentence. Daniel's father, actor Sancho, attended portions of the trial, his famous face aged by grief and shame. He issued a statement expressing condolences to Edwin's family and acknowledging that his son had committed an unforgivable act. The Spanish media, which had initially treated the case as a potential miscarriage of justice against a fellow countryman, gradually shifted tone as evidence mounted, eventually condemning Daniel's actions and expressing sympathy for Edwin's family. Edwin's family pushed for extradition, so Daniel would serve his sentence in Spain, arguing that they deserved the ability to visit and confront him. But Thai authorities denied the request, insisting that a crime committed on Thai soil would result in punishment under Thai law. In a Thai prison, Daniel was transferred to Bangkok Remand Prison, one of Thailand's most notorious facilities, where he would begin serving his life sentence. His YouTube channel was deleted. His social media accounts went dark. The world moved on, but he would remain frozen in that cell, haunted by what he had done. There's something uniquely disturbing about premeditated murder, the cold calculation that transforms a human being into an object to be eliminated. When someone kills in rage or fear, we can at least understand the emotional mechanism, even if we condemn the act. But when someone spends days or weeks planning another person's death, purchasing weapons, researching disposal methods, rehearsing their lies, that reveals a fundamental absence of empathy that is difficult to comprehend. DanielSancho didn't kill Edwin Arrieta in a moment of passion. He didn't kill him in self-defense. He lured Edwin halfway around the world, to an isolated island where Edwin would be vulnerable and alone, specifically to murder him. And after committing this act, Daniel dismembered Edwin's body with such methodical precision that investigators believed he might have practiced or researched the techniques beforehand. This wasn't just murder, it was desecration. What makes cases like this even more tragic is the targeting of LGBTQ+ individuals, who often face disproportionate rates of violence. Edwin lived openly as a gay man in Colombia, a country where LGBTQ+ people still face significant discrimination and risk. He traveled to Thailand seeking connection, and perhaps hoping to find acceptance. Instead, he found a predator who may have specifically targeted him because of his identity, his vulnerability, or his trust. The intersection of homophobia and violence creates a toxic combination that has claimed too many lives. We must also consider the role of social media and digital connection in modern crime. Edwin met Daniel online, communicated with him for months, and developed a sense of trust through screens and messages. But the person Daniel presented online bore no resemblance to the person he actually was. The internet allows predators to craft false identities, to manipulate and lure victims with a degree of sophistication that would have been impossible in previous generations. Edwin never had a chance to see the danger because Daniel had hidden it so effectively behind a charming digital persona. For Edwin's family, there is no closure, only the perpetual grief of losing a loved one to senseless violence. His mother will never see him practice medicine again, never celebrate another birthday with him, never watch him find happiness and love. His sister will never receive another text, never hear his voice on the phone, never hug him again. That absence echoes forward through time, affecting every holiday, every family gathering, every moment that Edwin should have been there but isn't. And yet, even in this darkness, there is something worth acknowledging. Edwin's life mattered. He healed people. He fought for acceptance. He lived authentically despite the risks. His story, as tragic as it is, serves as a reminder of the human cost behind every crime statistic. He wasn't just a victim. He was a person with dreams, talents, and people who loved him. By telling his story, we resist the killer's ultimate goal of erasing him. We say, Edwin Arrieta existed. He mattered. And he will not be forgotten. The justice system worked in this case, arguably better than it works in many others. Thai investigators were thorough and professional. The evidence was preserved and presented effectively. The trial was fair and transparent. DanielSancho was convicted and sentenced appropriately. But even perfect justice cannot undo murder. It cannot bring Edwin back. It cannot heal the wounds torn in his family's hearts. It can only acknowledge that a terrible wrong occurred and attempt to balance the scales in whatever small way is possible. This story isn't just about crime. It's about humanity, justice, and the victims who deserve to be remembered. If Crime 7 resonates with you, if you believe these stories need to be told, subscribe and join our community. Comment below, where are you watching from? And what case should we cover next? Your voice matters here. 2 years have passed since Edwin Arrieta's murder, and the ripples of that crime continue to spread. In Colombia, Edwin's former patients established a memorial fund in his name, providing free reconstructive surgery to victims of violence who cannot afford medical care. It's a fitting tribute to a man who dedicated his life to healing and helping others feel whole. His clinic in Monteria now displays a plaque. Dr. Edwin Arrieta Arteaga, healer, advocate, beloved son. Gone but never forgotten. Edwin's family has become advocates for LGBTQ+ safety, particularly for those traveling internationally. They partnered with Colombian and international organizations to create educational materials about the risks of meeting online connections in foreign countries, the warning signs of predatory behavior, and resources for staying safe. They've spoken at universities, community centers, and pride events, transforming their grief into action that might prevent other families from experiencing similar loss. In Thailand, the case prompted reforms in how crimes against tourists are investigated and prosecuted. Koh Phangan installed additional security cameras, and hotels now have stricter registration requirements and welfare check protocols. While these changes came too late for Edwin, they represent a systemic acknowledgement that tourist safety requires more than beautiful beaches and cheap accommodations. It requires infrastructure and vigilance to protect vulnerable visitors. DanielSancho's legacy is quite different. His name is now synonymous with predatory violence and the darkest possibilities of human behavior. His YouTube channel, once a platform for creative cooking content, is now studied in criminology courses as an example of how predators use social media to craft false personas. His case appears in training materials for law enforcement agencies across Europe and Asia, teaching investigators how to recognize patterns of premeditation in digital evidence. He wanted to be remembered, but not like this. In Spanish media, the Sancho case sparked difficult conversations about privilege, celebrity, and accountability. Daniel's father, Rodolfo Sancho, had initially used his fame and resources to support his son's defense, hiring expensive lawyers and making public statements suggesting Daniel might be innocent. But as evidence mounted, Rodolfo faced a devastating reckoning. His son was a murderer, and no amount of fame or money could change that fact. He eventually withdrew from public life. His career effectively ended by association with his son's crimes. The case also highlighted the specific vulnerabilities faced by LGBTQ+ travelers. Edwin's murder wasn't officially classified as a hate crime. Prosecutors focused on premeditated murder as the primary charge, but many advocates argue that Edwin's identity as an openly gay man made him a target. Daniel knew Edwin would be traveling alone, far from family and support systems, seeking connection in a foreign country. These factors made Edwin vulnerable, and predators like Daniel specifically exploit such vulnerabilities. Psychologists who studied the case noted disturbing parallels to other instances of what they call destination murders, crimes where killers lure victims to remote or foreign locations specifically to murder them away from familiar surroundings and robust police presence. Islands like Koh Phangan, with their transient populations and limited law enforcement infrastructure, create environments where such crimes become feasible. The anonymity that makes these locations attractive to tourists also makes them attractive to criminals. For investigators, the Sancho case became a textbook example of how digital evidence can solve modern crimes. The surveillance footage, phone records, search histories, and even Daniel's own documentation of his crime created an evidentiary trail so comprehensive that denial became impossible. In an era where criminals often believe they can outsmart law enforcement through technology, the Sancho case proves that technology more often becomes the rope by which criminals hang themselves. But beyond the legal and sociological implications, this case remains fundamentally a human tragedy. Edwin Arrieta was 44 years old when he died, not young, but not old. He had decades of life ahead of him, patience to heal, love to find, experiences to cherish. All of that was stolen in a hotel room on an island paradise by a man who saw Edwin not as a person, but as something disposable. The loss is incalculable not just to Edwin's family, but to everyone whose life he might have touched had he lived. Today, DanielSancho sits in a Bangkok prison cell, serving a life sentence with no possibility of parole. The conditions are harsh overcrowding, poor sanitation, limited medical care, and the constant threat of violence from other inmates. He has reportedly expressed remorse, though whether that remorse is genuine or merely self-pity is impossible to know. He has decades ahead of him to contemplate what he did, to live with the memory of dismembering another human being, to face the reality that he threw away his own life to take someone else's. Edwin's mother, Maria, gave one final interview on the second anniversary of her son's death. She stood in front of his grave in Larica, Colombia, surrounded by flowers left by community members who remembered him. She spoke about forgiveness, not for Daniel, she clarified, but for herself. She said carrying hatred was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. She said she had to find a way to live with the loss, to honor Edwin's memory by continuing to live, to love, to advocate for justice. "My son was murdered," she said, her voice steady despite tears streaming down her face. But he was not defeated. His legacy lives on in every patient he healed, every person he inspired to live authentically, every family that learns from his story and protects their loved ones. DanielSancho took Edwin's life, but he could not take Edwin's impact on this world. That remains, and it always will. The Koh Phangan Tourism Board removed images of the island from their marketing materials for several months after the murder, worried about the reputational damage. But gradually, tourists returned, drawn by the same beauty that had attracted Edwin. The island moved on, as places do. But for those who knew Edwin, for those who investigated his murder, For those who sat through the trial and heard every terrible detail, they cannot move on. They carry Edwin's story with them, a reminder that behind every crime statistic is a person whose absence creates a void that can never be filled. In the end, the case wasn't just about crime. It was about conscience, about the choice between seeing other people as human beings worthy of respect and dignity, or seeing them as objects to be used and discarded. DanielSancho made his choice. He chose violence. He chose deception. He chose to prioritize his own desires over another person's right to exist. And now he will spend the rest of his life living with the consequences of that choice, while Edwin's family and friends spend the rest of their lives living with the consequences of Daniel's actions. Justice was served in the courtroom. Daniel was convicted and sentenced appropriately. But justice in the legal sense cannot restore what was taken. It cannot bring Edwin back to his mother's arms, cannot return him to his clinic where patients are waiting, cannot give him the future he deserved. Legal justice is important, essential, even, but it is not the same as wholeness. It is not the same as healing. It is merely acknowledgement that a wrong occurred, and an attempt to prevent the perpetrator from harming anyone else. Thank you for staying with us through Edwin's story. This is what Crime 7 does. We remember the victims, we investigate the truth, and we refuse to let important stories fade into obscurity. If you believe this work matters, subscribe now. Turn on notifications. Share this video. And in the comments, tell us, what case should we investigate next? Together, we ensure that truth never dies in the dark. Edwin Arrieta's name will be remembered. His story will be told. And he will never, ever be forgotten. This is Crime 7, where truth finds light.